No one in the Sterling family boardroom could have imagined that the most powerful person connected to their company had been thrown out of the family estate only hours earlier. Sophia stood outside the mansion gates, one hand resting on her pregnant belly as tears streamed down her face. A single suitcase lay beside her. Behind the iron gates, her husband, Adrian, watched with cold satisfaction after humiliating her in front of his parents and ordering security to remove her from the estate. To him, she was nothing more than a quiet, unemployed wife who had become a burden. He had no idea that every paycheck he had ever earned came from the woman he had just discarded. For 3 years, Sophia had carefully hidden her identity as the secret billionaire owner of the $2 billion real estate company that employed not only Adrian, but nearly everyone his proud family admired. She wanted a marriage built on love instead of money. That dream died the moment her husband chose pride over loyalty and humiliated his pregnant wife without mercy. The next morning, Adrian walked confidently into the company's emergency board meeting, expecting nothing more than another routine audit. Instead, corporate auditors requested that every executive remain seated. Confidential financial records, ownership documents, and years of hidden transactions were projected onto the massive screen. Within seconds, whispers spread across the room. Faces turned pale. Directors stared at Adrian in disbelief as one unbelievable truth after another was revealed. Then the lead auditor announced the name of the company's true owner. The room fell into complete silence. The woman Adrian had mocked, betrayed, and thrown out of his family estate wasn't just his wife. She was the billionaire whose signature controlled every executive's future, including his own. By the time the meeting ended, his career, his reputation, and his family's pride had collapsed before the entire board. But the greatest shock was still waiting outside the boardroom doors. The heavy iron gates closed behind Sophia with a sharp metallic clang that echoed through the quiet estate. She didn't turn around. One hand rested gently on her pregnant belly, while the other tightened around the handle of a single brown suitcase. The morning sun bathed the sprawling mansion in golden light, making it look like a picture-perfect home. To Sophia, it had never felt colder. Behind the gates, Adrian stood with his arms folded across his tailored navy suit. His mother, Victoria, watched beside him with an expression of complete satisfaction, while his father remained silent, convinced that the family had finally rid itself of a woman they believed contributed nothing. "You heard my son," Victoria called through the gate. "Don't come back." Sophia lowered her eyes for a brief moment, fighting back another wave of tears. "I never wanted your money," she said quietly. Adrian gave a short, mocking laugh. "That's easy to say when you don't have any." The words lingered in the air. Neither Adrian nor his parents noticed the chauffeur-driven black sedan parked discreetly across the street. Behind its tinted windows sat Richard Hale, the longtime chairman of Orion Crest Developments. His normally calm expression hardened as he watched Sophia slowly walk away from the mansion carrying her own luggage. He had warned her years earlier. "If you hide your identity," he had once said, "you'll eventually discover whether the man loves you or the fortune behind you." She had insisted on taking that risk. Now she had her answer. Richard reached for his phone. "Prepare the emergency board meeting," he instructed his assistant. "The directors will want a reason. They'll have one tomorrow. And the auditors. Confirm they're attending." He ended the call without another word. Across the city, Adrian drove toward Orion Crest headquarters with complete confidence. The 40-story glass tower dominated the skyline, reflecting the bright afternoon sun. Employees greeted him respectfully as he entered the lobby. "Morning, Mr. Sterling." He smiled proudly. Success looked good on him. He had no idea that the company logo shining above the reception desk belonged to the woman he had thrown out of his home only hours earlier. Inside the executive elevator, his colleague Marcus stepped in carrying several folders. Have you heard? Heard what? Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Adrian shrugged. So, corporate auditors requested every executive be present. Adrian smirked. They're probably reviewing another acquisition. Marcus wasn't convinced. I've worked here 11 years. Auditors don't interrupt schedules without a serious reason. Adrian adjusted his tie. Whatever it is, it won't involve me. At that same moment, Sophia stepped into a quiet penthouse overlooking the city. The elderly housekeeper rushed toward her, stopping the moment she saw the suitcase. They really made you leave. Sophia managed a faint smile. I'm all right. No, my dear, the housekeeper replied gently, you're pretending to be. She carefully helped Sophia sit near the window before bringing her a glass of water. For several minutes, neither woman spoke. Finally, Sophia reached into her handbag and removed a dark leather portfolio. Inside lay documents few people in the world had ever seen. Original ownership certificates, trust agreements, board resolutions, every legal record proving that she, not Richard, not the board, not any investor, owned 100% of Orion Crest Developments. 3 years earlier, after her parents died unexpectedly, she had inherited everything. She had kept her identity hidden because she wanted an ordinary marriage. Instead, she had discovered extraordinary betrayal. Her phone rang. Richard. I'm sorry, he said quietly after she answered. You warned me. I wish I'd been wrong. She looked toward the distant skyline, where Orion Crest headquarters stood proudly above the city. What happens tomorrow? The truth. She closed the portfolio. And Adrian. Richard paused. His future depends entirely on how he responds when he learns who you really are. Sophia looked down at the child growing inside her. I never wanted revenge. I know. I only wanted to be loved. Outside, clouds slowly drifted across the afternoon sky as if the city itself were holding its breath. Tomorrow, one board meeting would expose years of carefully hidden secrets. Tomorrow, a husband who believed his wife had nothing would discover that every promotion, every paycheck, every luxury he proudly enjoyed had come from the woman he had humiliated. And before the meeting ended, everyone in that boardroom would learn the price of mistaking kindness for weakness. The following morning, Orion Crest Developments buzzed with an unusual tension. Employees who normally laughed over coffee spoke in hushed voices. Department heads walked briskly through the corridors, carrying folders marked confidential. Security personnel checked identification badges more carefully than usual, while several unfamiliar faces in dark business suits quietly entered the executive floor. Adrian noticed the change the moment he stepped out of the elevator. What happened here? He asked Marcus. Marcus lowered his voice. The auditors arrived before sunrise. Adrian raised an eyebrow. That's serious. No one knows. Even the board members were called in early. Adrian straightened his jacket and forced a confident smile. Then let's not keep them waiting. The executive boardroom overlooked the entire city through floor-to-ceiling windows. A polished mahogany table stretched across the room, surrounded by directors, senior executives, company attorneys, and financial advisors. Every seat was occupied except one at the head of the table. Adrian glanced toward it. Is the chairman running late? Before anyone answered, Richard Hale entered. The room immediately stood. Good morning, he said calmly. Please be seated. Unlike his usual warm demeanor, Richard's face revealed nothing. Behind him walked 4 corporate auditors carrying sealed briefcases, followed by 2 independent legal observers. The atmosphere instantly became heavier. The lead auditor placed several thick binders on the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "today's meeting concerns executive accountability, governance, and ownership verification." A murmur swept across the room. "Ownership verification." Adrian exchanged puzzled looks with several directors. Richard folded his hands. "Proceed." The first hour focused on financial compliance, revenue reports, project approvals, executive expense accounts. Everything appeared routine. Adrian relaxed. Marcus had worried for nothing. Then the lead auditor closed one binder and opened another marked restricted. "We will now examine executive conduct." Several directors shifted uneasily. A projector illuminated the large screen. Photographs appeared. Expense reports. Internal emails. Travel records. One executive was questioned about approving contracts involving a relative. Another admitted violating procurement policies. Richard listened silently while the auditors documented every answer. No one escaped scrutiny. Finally, the lead auditor looked toward Adrian. "Mr. Adrian Sterling." He smiled politely. "Yes, we have a few questions." "Of course." She clicked a remote. His employment file appeared. Promotion history. Performance reviews. Salary adjustments. Everything looked perfectly normal. She continued. "Yesterday evening, were you involved in a domestic incident?" The question caught him completely off guard. "My personal life has nothing to do with this company." "It may." He frowned. "I don't understand." She produced another document. "Our investigation includes executive conduct that may expose Orion Crest developments to reputational or legal risk." One director leaned forward. "What exactly are you suggesting?" The auditor remained composed. "We are establishing a timeline." She looked back at Adrian. "Did you remove your pregnant wife from your family residence yesterday?" Silence. Adrian cleared his throat. "That was a private marital matter." "So you confirm it occurred?" "Yes." "Was she carrying personal belongings when she left?" "Yes." "Were security personnel instructed to escort her off the property?" Adrian hesitated. "They were." Maury whispers spread around the room. Marcus stared at him in disbelief. The auditor continued writing. "No further questions on that matter, for now." Adrian felt irritation replacing confidence. "What does this have to do with company business?" Richard finally spoke. "Everything will become clear." Adrian leaned back in his chair. He still wasn't worried. His marriage had failed. That wasn't illegal. The meeting moved forward. Another auditor distributed sealed envelopes to every director. Inside each envelope was the same notice: Ownership Authentication Review. Several executives looked confused. One director raised his hand. "I thought ownership records were verified years ago." "They were," replied the lead auditor. "Today's verification concerns the beneficial owner." Richard watched the reactions carefully. No one in the room realized what was coming. Meanwhile, across the city, a black luxury sedan rolled toward Orion Crest headquarters. Inside, Sophia sat quietly beside the window, wearing an elegant cream-colored maternity suit. Her hair was neatly styled, and the sadness in her eyes had been replaced by calm determination. Beside her rested the leather portfolio she had protected for years. The chauffeur glanced through the rearview mirror. "Are you ready, ma'am?" She looked at the towering headquarters growing larger in the distance. I've spent 3 years hiding. Her hand rested gently over her unborn child. Today, my child deserves a mother who is no longer afraid. The vehicle entered the underground executive entrance reserved for board members. Security officers immediately recognized the authorization code attached to the vehicle. Without hesitation, the gates opened. Upstairs, Adrian checked his watch impatiently. How much longer is this audit going to take? No one answered. At that exact moment, the boardroom doors opened. Every head turned toward the entrance. The room became so quiet that the faint hum of the air conditioner could be heard. A woman stepped inside with quiet confidence, carrying a leather portfolio. Adrian glanced casually toward the doorway, and the color drained from his face. Sophia. His voice barely escaped his lips. The directors looked from Adrian to the elegantly dressed woman standing beside Richard Hale. None of them yet understood why the chairman himself had walked forward to welcome her. But within moments, every person in that boardroom would discover that the woman Adrian had thrown out of the family estate was not there as a guest. She had arrived as the person with the authority to change every life in that room. Every eye in the boardroom remained fixed on Sophia. She neither hurried nor hesitated. Her steps were calm, measured, and confident, echoing softly across the polished wooden floor. Gone was the frightened woman who had stood outside the mansion gates with tears in her eyes. Standing before the board now was someone whose quiet dignity commanded attention without a single raised voice. Adrian slowly pushed back his chair. Sophia, what are you doing here? She looked at him briefly, but offered no reply. Instead, she greeted Richard with a respectful nod. Good morning. Good morning, Miss Sophia, Richard replied warmly. The simple exchange sent another wave of whispers around the room. Several directors exchanged puzzled glances. Since when did the chairman address Adrian's unemployed wife with such obvious respect? Richard gestured toward the empty chair at the head of the table. Please. Sophia walked toward it. Adrian frowned. That's the chairman's seat. Richard turned to him. It isn't. The room fell silent again. Richard remained standing as Sophia took her place. Only after she was comfortably seated did he sit beside her. The lead auditor rose. For the record, let today's minutes reflect that all directors, executive officers, independent auditors, and legal representatives are present. One of the company's attorneys unlocked a silver briefcase and removed several sealed envelopes. He handed one to each director. Inside your envelopes, he explained, are certified ownership records obtained from the National Corporate Registry, the company's founding trust, and the Independent Fiduciary Office. Paper rustled throughout the room. Adrian watched impatiently. What exactly are we looking at? You'll see. The attorney continued. Please turn to the final page. Every director did. Expressions of confusion quickly replaced curiosity. One elderly board member adjusted his glasses twice before looking back down. This can't be right. Another director looked toward Richard. I thought the Founders Trust controlled the company. Richard answered calmly. The trust safeguards the assets. It has never owned them. The lead auditor stepped forward. For the past 3 years, Orion Crest Developments has had one beneficial owner holding 100% of the controlling voting shares. A projector illuminated the massive screen behind them. Corporate registration documents appeared. Official government seals. Notarized signatures. Board resolutions. Transfer certificates. Every document carried the same name. Sophia Sterling. No one spoke. The silence seemed endless. Adrian stared at the screen as though willing the letters to disappear. His lips moved, but no sound came out. One director finally whispered, "She's the owner." The attorney nodded. "The sole owner." Another director leaned forward. 100%. Correct. Adrian suddenly laughed. It wasn't genuine laughter. It was disbelief. This has to be some kind of joke. Nobody joined him. He looked desperately toward Richard. "You knew." "I've known from the beginning." "You never told me." "It wasn't my secret to tell." Adrian turned toward Sophia. "You lied to me." For the first time since entering the room, Sophia spoke directly to him. "I never lied. You told me you were ordinary. I told you I wanted an ordinary life. That's not the same thing. You never asked who I was." Her calmness unsettled him more than anger ever could. "I asked what you did. And I answered honestly." She folded her hands neatly on the table. "I manage investments." Several directors quietly nodded. "Technically." She had. Adrian's face reddened. "You made me believe you had nothing." Sophia looked into his eyes. "No, Adrian. You decided I had nothing because I didn't flaunt my wealth." The words landed heavily across the room. Richard watched without interrupting. He had waited years for truth to speak for itself. The lead auditor continued. "There remains one final matter." She opened another folder. "Our investigation also reviewed executive conduct involving conflicts of interest, abuse of authority, and actions capable of damaging shareholder confidence." She looked toward Adrian. "Yesterday afternoon, while serving as a senior executive of this company, you publicly humiliated, threatened, and expelled the company's sole shareholder from her marital residence." No one breathed. "You did so," the auditor continued, "without any knowledge of her corporate position." Another document appeared on the screen. Security camera footage. The mansion entrance. Sophia standing quietly beside her suitcase. Adrian throwing the envelope containing the divorce papers onto her luggage. Victoria pointing toward the gate. Security officers escorting Sophia from the property. Every movement had been time-stamped. The footage ended with Sophia walking away alone while holding her pregnant belly. Gasps echoed around the room. Marcus lowered his head. "I had no idea." One female director wiped tears from her eyes. "No woman should be treated like that." The lead auditor closed the video. "Regardless of ownership status, the conduct displayed is inconsistent with Orion Crest Development's Executive Code of Ethics." Adrian struggled to defend himself. "My marriage became company business," interrupted the auditor, "when the individual subjected to that treatment was the company's controlling shareholder." Another attorney stood. "Furthermore, your actions created significant legal and reputational exposure for Orion Crest Developments." Adrian looked desperately around the table. No one met his eyes. The directors who had once admired him now looked disappointed. Embarrassed. Ashamed. Sophia remained composed. She had not interrupted. She had not celebrated. She had not smiled. She simply listened. Richard finally stood. "For years," he said quietly, "many people praised Adrian's leadership." He paused. "Yesterday, he revealed the character behind that leadership." His words echoed through the boardroom. Then he turned toward Sophia. "The board recognizes you as the lawful owner of Orion Crest Developments. Every director slowly rose to their feet, one after another. Not for Richard, not for tradition, for Sophia. Adrian remained seated, frozen in disbelief, as the entire room acknowledged the woman he had dismissed as worthless less than 24 hours earlier. Yet Sophia's expression remained solemn, because she knew the meeting wasn't over. The ownership had been revealed. The humiliation had been exposed. But the auditors still had one sealed report left unopened, a report containing financial evidence that would reveal a far deeper betrayal than anyone in the room had imagined. The atmosphere inside the boardroom had changed completely. No one was looking at the presentation screen anymore. Every eye remained fixed on Adrian. Only the faint sound of the air conditioner disturbed the silence. The lead auditor reached for the final sealed folder resting on the conference table. Unlike the previous reports, this one bore a bright red label that read Executive Ethics and Financial Integrity Review. Richard folded his hands. "Please continue." The auditor broke the seal. "Our investigation began as a routine governance review," she said. "However, several irregularities required a broader examination." A spreadsheet appeared on the large screen. Columns of figures stretched across multiple years. "Over the past 18 months, she continued, Mr. Adrian Sterling approved a series of contracts awarded to 3 outside consulting firms. Adrian immediately sat upright. "Those contracts were approved by management." "They were recommended by management," the auditor corrected. "The approvals carried your signature." Another document appeared. Company registration records. One director frowned. "These companies share the same mailing address." "Correct," the auditor replied. A second director adjusted his glasses. "And they were all incorporated within weeks of each other." "Also correct." The auditor pressed another button. A chart connected the 3 firms through a web of ownership records, before ending with a familiar name. "Nathan Cross." Marcus leaned toward Adrian. "Isn't Nathan your college roommate?" Adrian hesitated. "Yes." The room erupted into quiet whispers. The auditor waited until the room settled before continuing. "Our investigation found no evidence that Mr. Sterling personally stole company funds. However, we did find that he failed to disclose a close personal relationship with a contractor who received millions of dollars in company projects." One of the independent directors spoke firmly. "That is a serious conflict of interest." "It is," the auditor answered. "Even when services are legitimately provided, executive policy requires full disclosure." Adrian quickly defended himself. "The work was completed. The company didn't lose money." "That determination will be made after a complete forensic review," replied the auditor. Sophia listened silently. This wasn't why she had come. She had never wanted Adrian publicly disgraced. She had wanted honesty. Nothing more. Richard turned toward Adrian. "Were you aware of the disclosure policy?" "Yes." "And did you disclose your relationship with Mr. Cross?" Adrian lowered his eyes. "No." A heavy silence filled the room again. Richard sighed. "I've always believed that mistakes can be corrected." He paused. "But dishonesty destroys trust." Sophia finally spoke. "My father used to tell me that buildings are made of steel and concrete." She looked around the room. "But companies are built on character." No one interrupted her. "I didn't hide my identity because I wanted power over anyone. I hid it because I wanted to know whether people valued me without my wealth." Her eyes met Adrian's. I never imagined that the greatest test would come from my own husband. Adrian's confident posture disappeared. For the first time since the meeting began, genuine regret appeared on his face. He remembered every cruel word outside the mansion, every tear she had tried to hide, every moment he had mistaken her quiet humility for weakness. Those memories now weighed more heavily than the auditor's findings. The lead auditor closed the final folder. Our review is complete. We recommend that the board determine the appropriate disciplinary measures consistent with company policy. Richard slowly rose from his chair. The board will now deliberate. Around the table, directors exchanged solemn glances. No one spoke lightly. The decision they were about to make would not only determine Adrian's future, it would define the values Orion Crest Developments would stand for in the years ahead. Outside the boardroom, employees gathered quietly in the hallway, unaware that the company's future was being rewritten behind closed doors. For nearly 20 minutes, no one inside the boardroom spoke. The directors carefully reviewed the auditor's recommendations, making notes and quietly exchanging documents. The tension was so thick that even the sound of a pen touching paper seemed unusually loud. Adrian remained seated, his eyes fixed on the polished table before him. Only yesterday he had believed he was climbing toward the peak of his career. Now he couldn't bring himself to look at anyone around him. Finally, Richard broke the silence. The board has reached its decision. Every face turned toward him. Our responsibility is not only to protect this company's financial future, but also its integrity. He looked at Adrian with disappointment rather than anger. Mr. Adrian Sterling, effective immediately, you are suspended from all executive responsibilities pending the completion of an independent governance review. The words struck Adrian harder than he expected. Richard, please. This decision was not mine alone, Richard replied calmly. It is the decision of the board. One by one, the directors nodded in agreement. An attorney slid a formal document across the table. You'll receive written notice of the review process and your obligations during the investigation. Adrian didn't reach for it. Instead, he looked toward Sophia. She had not voted. She had not demanded punishment. She simply sat quietly, her hands folded over the portfolio that had changed everything. I was wrong, Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia met his eyes. Yes, I thought you were hiding because you had nothing. I was hiding because I wanted something money couldn't buy. What was that? A husband who would stand beside me, whether I was wealthy or poor. Her answer left the room silent once again. Richard stood. Mrs. Sterling, there is one final item requiring your attention. He handed her a leather folder bearing the company seal. The board requests your formal acceptance as executive chair. Sophia looked down at the folder but didn't open it immediately. She slowly rose from her chair. I accept the responsibility, she said, but I want everyone here to understand something. She looked around the room. This company will never become a place where people are judged by the size of their bank account, their family name, or the title on their office door. Several directors nodded. The people who clean our buildings deserve respect. The interns deserve respect. The receptionists deserve respect. And our executives must lead by example. Her voice remained gentle, yet every word carried authority. If Orion Crest is going to grow, it will grow with integrity. A quiet round of applause began at the far end of the table. Within seconds, every director was applauding. Richard smiled proudly. For the first time in years, he felt certain the company was in the right hands. Adrian remained standing alone. He realized that the greatest thing he had lost wasn't his executive position. It was the trust of the woman who had loved him before anyone knew she was one of the wealthiest people in the country. As the meeting came to an end, the boardroom doors opened. Outside, employees instinctively stood aside as Sophia walked out beside Richard. Many had never seen her before. Others recognized her immediately from the ownership announcement that had just circulated through the executive offices. Whispers spread through the hallway. "That's the owner. She's so young. Is that really Mr. Sterling's wife?" Sophia acknowledged the employees with a warm smile before continuing toward her new office, determined that the next chapter of Orion Crest would be defined not by revenge, but by justice, humility, and leadership. As Sophia approached the executive office that had remained unused for years, she paused outside the door. A brass nameplate had already been installed. "Executive Chair." She stared at it for a moment before quietly pushing the door open. The office overlooked the entire city. Floor to ceiling, windows flooded the room with sunlight, while architectural models of Orion Crest's landmark developments lined the shelves. It was beautiful, yet strangely lonely. Richard entered behind her. "Your father always believed this office belonged to the person who served the company, not the person who controlled it." Sophia smiled faintly. "I wish he were here." "So do I." There was a gentle knock. The company secretary stepped inside, carrying a tablet. "Ma'am, the media has learned that an emergency board meeting took place. Reporters are requesting a statement." Sophia shook her head. "Not today. They're also asking about Mr. Adrian Sterling." "No comment." The secretary nodded and quietly left. Richard looked at her with approval. "You could easily destroy him in the press. I've already seen enough destruction." Her hand rested gently on her belly. "My child doesn't need a mother consumed by revenge." Meanwhile, Adrian slowly packed the few personal belongings from his executive office. His family photographs, a framed employee recognition award, a crystal paperweight commemorating his promotion. Each item reminded him of a future he had believed was guaranteed. Marcus appeared at the doorway. "I didn't know." Adrian gave a bitter smile. "Neither did I." Marcus hesitated. "For what it's worth, everyone respected you. Respected the man they thought I was." "No." Marcus sighed. "They respected your work." He paused. "But yesterday, you became someone none of us recognized." Adrian lowered his head. "I know." After Marcus left, Adrian remained alone for several minutes before carrying his box toward the elevator. Employees who usually greeted him warmly stepped aside in uncomfortable silence. No one mocked him. No one celebrated. Their silence spoke louder than words. Outside the building, Victoria's luxury car pulled into the executive parking area. She hurried inside after hearing rumors about the board meeting. She found Adrian just as he exited the elevator, carrying the cardboard box. "What is this?" she demanded. "They suspended me." "They can't do that." "They already did." "This is because of that woman." Adrian looked at his mother with tired eyes. "No, it's because of me." Victoria frowned. "Don't start blaming yourself. I threw my pregnant wife out of our home. You did what any respectable family would have done." Adrian slowly shook his head. "No, I threw away the only person who loved me without asking for anything in return." For the first time, Victoria had no answer. Across the lobby, the elevator doors opened once more. Sophia stepped out with Richard and two senior executives. The lobby fell silent. Employees respectfully moved aside. Adrian and Sophia found themselves standing only a few feet apart. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Adrian took a hesitant step forward. "I'm sorry." Sophia looked at him quietly. "I know those words can't undo what I did." She nodded. "They can't. I don't expect forgiveness." "No. I only wanted you to hear me say it." Sophia held his gaze for a long moment. Then she answered softly, "I hope one day you become the man you pretended to be when we first met." With that, she continued walking toward the main entrance. No anger, no insults, no triumph, just quiet dignity. Adrian watched her leave, realizing that losing his title had hurt far less than watching the woman he loved walk away with nothing left to say. And for the first time in his life, he understood that true wealth had never been measured in billions of dollars or corporate power. It had been measured in trust. And that was the one fortune he could never recover once it was broken.